I'm going to treat this like a teaser for October 10th, so just a month from now we are going to have a mini conference in the other room, and we're going to do some really hands-on activities, and then we're going to have a keynote speaker at the end. So I'll give you the scoop. It's going to be Stephen Petro from Hillsborough. If you look him up, he's a local writer, and he does a lot of journalism. It's funny. He's got a new book coming out, so I'm hoping that'll be a lot of fun. And the reason we like to do a lot of plain language hands-on workshops is just because it makes it real for everybody. So we're going to try to do that today. A little bit of background. Do you want to say anything about who you are? Or do they all know?
I can tell you about who I am. I'm Christina Strauch. I've been with the town for about 14 years in a communications type role for 4 years, I think. Prior to that, working a lot with like council agenda process type things. Mary Jane picked me out of a lineup to help her with plain language, but a lot of what I was doing with the council process was basically plain language, trying to get council memos to sound like something that anybody could read, as opposed to having just been written for a council. So we've been working on this for a while, pre-pandemic, grassroots effort, and now we are basically training the whole organization, as many as we can.
Yeah, and so I'm Mary Jane Nirdlinger. I'm a deputy town manager. I've worked in lots of different departments at the town over the years. I've been in this role about 7 years and at the town about 15 now. And like Christina said, we ended up working a lot on agenda items together, and I would look at her comments and go, oh, this is somebody who actually knows how to write for a lay audience. And then I stumbled across plainlanguage.gov, which is the federal government's website, and I was like, oh, this actually has a name. Like there's this whole thing you can learn about how to communicate like a human being so other people can understand what you're doing. So we did start pretty grassroots. We put a little team together and we were coaching people on how to do this. We were training small departments. At this point, we have trained over 350 town employees, and that's since we launched this program last fall. So it's been about a year we've had the program, about 6 months or so of training. We have some in-house videos and lots of workshops. So what I'm going to do with you today is a very high level and brief taste of plain language, and hopefully you'll come back on the 10th. But it really is wonderful. You can start anywhere, any progress helps, and it's all with the goal of making our information more transparent to the people who are receiving it. So we'll just jump in. We've already done introductions and a little bit of what is plain language, but we'll touch on some of the actual techniques. And then we're going to try it out, and maybe, hopefully we'll have time to do a little usability testing, because I think this is a group that could really run with that. So, plain language, right off the bat, I want to say it is not just the words you write, it is also the layout and the visuals. So we'll talk a little bit about that. This is the federal government's definition of plain language communication your audience can understand the first time they read or hear it. And I think it was Obama who signed the plain language law into act, and there are standards for federal government websites, and you can find plain language checklists for a lot of agencies, but there really hasn't been much of this at the state or especially the local level. So we've been kind of inventing it from the ground up. There's a lot of research about plain language, especially in the financial and health industries. And people do describe something that's written in plain language as clearer. They prefer it if you give them an A/B test. And you'll hear comments like it's well written or it's well organized. But what it's really getting at is taking content like this. If you got this number, you would never read it because you're busy people and like who wants to read it? And turning it into something like this. And so this is very much like the experience we were having with council agenda items. People were writing pages and pages and pages of background and history and how we got here, and the very last page would have the recommendation. And so what we've been trying to get people to do is to really think about creating something your audience might actually read, putting the key information up top, using white space, and organizing it in a way that you're going to be able to get into it, you can find what you want, you can skim it, and come back. That can be your skimmer. Like I said, it's not just the words though. A lot of people think it's grammar police. It's about using good words. It's about organizing them. And sometimes it's about turning them into visuals. So this was an example with our inspections department, we had people coming into the building and saying that they needed to, reconnect their utilities. And so we got that question a lot, and somebody went to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg, website and pulled this off and changed the names, and we started handing this out. And they said people are still asking questions, like it's not working, and we went down and talked to the person who was handing this out, who told us where he got it. And it took about 2 hours of conversation to understand who was actually coming in and why, that most of them didn't even live in Orange County, that they didn't need their utilities reconnected or by us, and they didn't need a permit. And those were things they were being told by contractors. So we needed to educate both the contractors and the folks who were being sent to our office, instead of just handing them something they couldn't read because they still had questions. And after we did actually rewrite that document to look like the last one I showed you, but then we realized it would be much better as a flow chart and as something you put on the web. So you think about how people interact with your information. It's not, brochures and posters as much as it once was. It's also, what can I put on the web? What can people download? So you want to think about all those different formats and how accessible your information can be in other places. So this became, the first question, is the building in the Chapel Hill Municipal District? No, you don't need it. You don't need to be talking to us. I don't know, let's verify your address. So it helped walk them through how to get the information they actually needed. In the end was tell Duke Energy you don't need an inspection in order to turn your power on. And that was the heart of it. They were being told that Duke was telling people they needed an inspection and they didn't. So that was kind of the bottom line for a lot of folks. So it takes time to get here, but once you're here, the questions diminish. And that's part of the value of plain language is you spend the time and money up front to do it well, but then you're not spending as much time answering questions and having confusion in your audience. So this is just a summary of plain language. When you do it well, your information is easy to find, and that doesn't just mean on the web, it means in the document. So, key information's up front, it's not buried somewhere deep in the bottom. Our language is relatable. So that can mean things like saying we and you. It's something we encapsulate as talk like a human being, write like a human being. You don't want to use the sort of stuffy, bureaucratic, off-putting voice for communications with your residents who need some information, or an audience that isn't really coming to you for bureaucratic stuff. When you write in a more familiar way and you use simpler language, people actually understand what you're saying. So a great test is, once you've written something, hand it to somebody who does not know your content. Somebody who doesn't already know the problem you're trying to solve. Somebody who does not work in your department. Ask them if they can understand it and use it. And that's one of the best tests, because if you and I work in the same department and we've written this together, or we've talked about this a million times, and I hand it to you, you're like, yeah, that's good. But if I hand it to you and you're more like the person who's gonna read it, you're gonna say, I don't understand this paragraph. What am I supposed to do with this? And that's gonna elicit different questions. We answer questions and provide relevant information. This is actually, we can go pretty deep on that. Sometimes we feel like we're answering questions, but a lot of our council memos would start out with 20 years ago, the town had 6 public meetings, and then 100 people showed up, and then this happened, and this, and this, and this, and this, until you finally got to what was relevant. The question in the decision maker's mind is, what is this about? What am I being asked to decide, and who's gonna be mad at me? They don't actually want 20 years of history. They might later, so put it somewhere else if you need to. But starting to put yourself in the shoes of your reader is really critical. It's like having some empathy for the person who's gonna get your content. What is it like for them? And that's actually hard to do because you know your content. My background is in planning, and when I talk to planners, it's easy for me to forget that terms like zoning and board of adjustment and master planning, I understand those. I've been working with those for 25 years. I know what they mean. But when I go to my mom's house and she's like, all my neighbors are really mad about this thing, I'm like, okay, I have to explain this a different way because she's gonna go tell all the neighbors what I said. That's a true story. But it's hard to remember what it's like to be that person who doesn't know what you have learned on the job. So that's where that user testing comes in really handy too. And relevant information means what they care about, not all the stuff you want to tell them. So one time we had an email that went out to employees, and it started out saying, in order to improve efficiency in our department, we are transitioning your paycheck to, it was longer than that. But, the headline there was, we're doing something in our department that makes us work better, and I'm like, I don't care, just tell me where you're putting my money, right? So it's again thinking about, that's important to them, like we wanna tell you why we're making this change, and like we're justifying what we're doing, but the reader doesn't care. They want that bottom line. So, that's sort of how you write and what you say and, where your focus is. It really boils down to giving people clear guidance when there's a question or instructions. You want them to know what they need to know, and you want to be open to feedback. And that can be hard for us because sometimes feedback feels like an attack. You send something out and a bunch of people are mad or they didn't understand it, and you're like, I spent so much time on that. But being able to hear that as, this isn't right yet, let's try it again, is really critical. So feedback comes in all kinds of ways. It's not just someone telling you, they don't like your document. It's also people who make the same mistake over and over, or who have the same question over and over. So you have to start to kind of reframe all those interactions as opportunities to look at where the root cause is and how can I change some of our communications. And being willing to try things a little differently. Sometimes I think in the public sector especially, we feel like there's a lot of scrutiny over what we're putting out, and if you get it wrong, it's the end of the world. But 2 days later, everyone has pretty much forgotten about it. So being willing to try something and to go to someone and say, hey, we wanna try this new way. We're gonna do it once and see how it goes, get the feedback, we'll change if we need to. Sometimes that can help soften someone's resistance to trying something a different way. In the packet that we handed out, the first page has some of our sort of general thoughts about plain language, and then the second page has our kind of top 10 rules. So, not rules, guidelines. And in brief, we've kind of touched on a lot of this. You want to know your audience. So who are you writing this for? Is it kids? Is it adults? Is it adults with low literacy? Is it your council members? Et cetera, et cetera. Use everyday language, I would say as much and as often as you can. Sometimes that's going to look like contractions and much less formal. Sometimes it's going to be slightly more formal, but you can be professional without being bureaucratic and stuff. No jargon. That's hard to do. Sometimes jargon is appropriate also. If you are a firefighter talking to another firefighter in an email, you can go ahead and use your jargon because you understand each other. It is shorthand for what you do. Planner to planner, that's gonna make sense. It's when you're talking to different audiences, you want to limit the technical jargon. If you have to use it, explain it. Have a sidebar, explain it in the sentence. And it's actually seeing the jargon that's the hardest, because we use words in the public sector all the time that other people don't. So that's where someone who is not in your field can really be helpful. Be brief, that's pretty clear. Use action words. In the public sector, we love the passive voice. So it was decided to remove this service. Like, no one wants to say we made that decision, right? But that makes people even more angry and distrustful, because if I don't know who made the decision, I don't know who to be angry at, and it just kind of feeds into that feeling that like the government doesn't work for me, and someone's doing something and they're not telling me what's really going on, and what else are they hiding? So transparency is actually something that this helps with. And there's a study that we sometimes show about local government versus other sectors, and we tend to perform really high in trust compared to state and federal, but transparency is one area where we can improve, and this does that. Organize your information. So before you set out to write something or just pull up the last one and start changing it, think about what you're trying to accomplish. And that last one and changing a thing, we do that all the time because it saves time, but it sometimes means you're just not even seeing an opportunity to do something better. So next time you find yourself opening the last one, like I challenge you to pause and see if there's something different to do that. Summarize, let people know, you know, in brief, what do I need to know about the rest of this content? And review your work. Have someone else review it. Have a user group review it, depending on what it is you're producing. And we say this a lot when we work with our departments, good does not mean fancy. So a lot of us think about what we were taught in school, and the more vocabulary words you use, the higher your score, and the longer your sentence is, and if you could work a semicolon in there, like extra points. That's not what this is about. If you wanna write a novel, go for it and use all your skills. If you're writing professional information for your government and you want it to get out to the people who need to know it, like that's what they want. It's efficient and clear communication. So this is, you know, similar to what we just went through, but again, it's not fancy. I think I'll just point to this one. You're telling someone what happened. You know, try to keep it more conversational than sort of stuffy school-like. Okay. So let's try it out, especially since it's after lunch. In the workbook, you have a copy of this so you don't have to read it on the screen. I know that was kind of a whirlwind of stuff, but take a moment and look at this email. If someone asked you to help improve it, what do you notice in here? Like, what are your thoughts? You don't have to rewrite it, but just start thinking about what's on the page. And then we'll ask for you to tell us what you think. So there are no right answers or one way to do any of this, but what do you notice? Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, the second paragraph, it talks about, like, getting your badge and then also registering your badge, so it's like so much combined with that one paragraph, where I'm just confused.
Yep. Yep.
I feel like they didn't answer, like, why am I writing this? I'm a little lost between, I got the word Q, but I stopped there.
I love that. I stopped there. Like, how many of you just sort of your brain shut off at some point while reading this? Right?
I got there and then went back up and was like, wait, did they tell me what any of this was for?
Right.
Yeah,
Because it just starts in,
Yeah. So far we have 3 votes for confused.
Or even location, like it says, if users, wait, let's see. Or they can schedule an appointment, pick up one up where, or, if it is not like computer can be out by clicking this link, is it the link that's, you know, there's so many questions of where can I find this information, or where do I need to go?
I'm still not even clear what it is we're doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It seems like maybe it could be like that, if you need this, then there's step 1, 2, 3, if you need this, there's like, but I still don't even know what we're doing.
So that's exactly how I felt when someone gave me this and said, how do I fix this? I was like, I don't even know what you're trying to accomplish here, right? And so that's where we started, like, what is this email, who are you sending it to, and why? And the answer was, people send me all these questions, and so every time they send a question, I put a new answer in here, and then I just send this to them. So it's like, these are my FAQs, right? Like, I just sort of focus every time someone asks a question. I was like, well, that is clearly not working. And the reason he submitted it is because people, like, they kept bugging him. I was like, well, yeah, because no one's reading this, because what are you supposed to do with it? So you can see the subject is, it was like copier, and then, you know how copiers have those weird names? That was the original subject line. So obviously someone had some kind of question about a copier, and this is what they got back. So at that point, you're just not gonna read it. Like, you're gonna go find some tech person close to you and be like, okay, how do I really do this? And, you can see there are all these different instructions, like you all were picking up on. So as we talked about it, I was like, it's fine to have a shortcut FAQ. It's fine to try to be efficient answering the questions, but this is not the way to do it. So one way to kind of revamp something like this that we talked about is like this. So like, give me an actual subject line. Give some sort of opening, tell people what this is. Like, these are answers to frequently asked questions. If it doesn't help you, call me, you know, whatever. And then see here how, need to add a printer to your computer? Click, click. Need you need a printer badge, email us, blah, blah, blah. First time using your badge, don't have a badge. So you can still build FAQs, but there are a couple of, what do you notice in here, like from the plain language aspects about how that's working?
You can skip to the part you need.
You can skip to the part you need.
There are no more users, it's just you.
Right. It's got that informal voice, and you connect with that, right? Because I want this, do you need this? Yes, I do.
It takes out so many unnecessary words, so it's very searchable, like my mind knows the word I'm looking for, so I'm just looking for only those words.
Right. You can skim it, like there are breadcrumbs in there, and that's how our brains work, especially if you're reading something on a screen. Like you're skimming for what you need and then you hone in on that. Yeah. So does that make sense? Okay. All right. Here's a fire department example. So a morning email might look something like this. It's on page 4 of your document. Take a moment and just, by yourself, you've got a pen. You don't have to rewrite the whole email, but like work out for yourself, how would you reorganize this information? Like what would you do if you were the one sending this out first thing in the morning to your shift? Alright, so wherever you are, would someone care to share some thoughts about what you would do to make this better? And this gets sent out every morning.
I made it into sections sort of like weather, detour, I don't know, like traffic or something, then vehicle checks, safety, and under, weather, just like bullet, hydrate, take breaks, detour, Main Street closed, follow detour signs, vehicle checks for the things, and then safety, the training, like just make it like a lot less words and more organized.
Anyone else?
I think every day it should be in a template where people can expect to find information that happens every day.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's consistent no matter which shift I'm on and who's running it.
Yeah, but then they buried the most important thing that has the most priority deadline at the bottom.
Yeah.
This is due tomorrow. So what do you do about the due tomorrow? Yep, put it at the top. And you can do that with a template, if you know like important information, put it at the top. Any other reactions to that?
I would change the subject, if or is.
Oh, before was
If
just
there's
because this was a before after.
Or
example.
just put, if it is gonna be every day, the date as the subject, or times of that.
How about having a subject?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I just feel like it's a lot of information thrown at you, and so I'm like, okay, how do I group this in my brain, I guess?
Yeah, and I think that's actually a good point because there is a lot of stuff in here, we never talked about it, but this is the kind of email that goes out at the beginning of every shift, so everyone's got what they need to know. I mean, does the weather need to be in an email or is it posted somewhere in the building? I think that's kind of what I mean about fresh eyes, do you actually need to put all of this in an email? And you might get there by starting with this organization. What are my headings? What's most important? Do I wanna put all of this in here? Is this the best way to communicate with my group? Those are all the kinds of questions you ask yourself. And a lot of that just comes from starting to play with it. So that's why we do our plain language workshops. People will come with something and it may be half-baked or they have an idea and they just need to get started. And you start reorganizing something, asking questions, and that's where the conversation really helps the person who's creating the document figure out a new or better way to get the information through that they're trying to get through. Yeah.
I feel like with the examples we're looking at tend to be, these are pretty clunky, right? Like we know from looking at them that there's a long way from here to there. I feel like the bigger issue that we're all gonna face is the near enemy, right? I'm pretty sure that we're surrounded by folks who want to communicate things out. They've sent us information, they're like, this is clear, it's all clear, it's in plain language, and you turn back to them and say, I'm afraid to inform you that it's not, and there's some things we're gonna need to clean this up. So how have you handled getting buy-in from the different departments who are close, but haven't made it to the goal that you have in mind for plain language?
think one of the things we've done as an organization is we've tried to say, this is something we're doing, and we've tried to train everybody who writes. So the more people who buy in and the more of a culture it is in your organization, the easier it is to say, hey, I think I see some opportunities to use plain language, and they're like, oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. So that's one thing, but it's a pretty big effort on our part. I think the other experience we've had is go for the people who will work with you. Because the better their content is and the better it looks and the better the feedback they're getting, other people will notice. So when we started, it was really just, people who were receptive to receiving feedback. And that's where we got the best change. I think one of my favorite things from a workshop this year was we had someone come in with a list of pickleball versus tennis rules to post out in the courts. And we had a great conversation. And this person's not like a writer, they're a program manager. They were extremely open to doing it differently. And they ended up with a great visual, many fewer words, and they've gotten good community feedback. And that's the kind of story that gets around. So I think look for the wins. You don't have to get everybody to do everything perfectly, just make some progress, and the more you can share those wins, the better.
I mean, I'll say from experience, there are definitely some people who do think that they are there or they are close enough, so they don't need any other feedback. And honestly, at a certain point, I just have to put less effort in because I'm not gonna get anywhere with this person, unfortunately. But like Mary Jane said, I think other people who are, buy into it and make the organization look like we're doing something different helps a whole lot. Cause we have, everybody's got somebody in their lives who's like that.
Yeah. And we have so many opportunities to make things better.
Yes.
Like, don't die on that hill, right? Were you gonna say something?
I think I was gonna say something else, but I forgot it.
I was gonna say, could you put it through, into AI and just ask for sort of a readability check? Have you tried that? Is that even?
Yeah, so you don't have to use AI for a reading level test. You can find that in Word. We're using AI as a pilot. You can take things and put it in AI and with good prompting, ask for simplified versions of it. We're using a program inside our firewall, so it's not like putting public data out there. And we're working with prompts, so things like rewrite this at a 6th grade reading level. That's a nice specific prompt that will get you some decent results. You still have to comb through that though, because it'll say things that aren't accurate, or it'll say things in a voice that's really not appropriate. So, do you want to say anything else? Anything else about writer? Yeah,
We're tailoring it
gonna
for
change.
our organization,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and the software we're using, we have our style guide loaded into it, so it can prompt according to how we want people to write.
Oh, I know what I was gonna say. So there have been a lot of people who we've done plain language training for, and they get it, and they're so good at plain language. We use plain language as a verb, and they also are maybe struggling a little bit with what the definition, what the spirit of plain language is. So even the people who have gone through it, the thing is that it's not a prescriptive thing like grammar where your subject and verb have to agree. It's an iterative process. So any step in a better direction is better than no step in a better direction. So for someone to be super efficient, we could look at, Mary Jane and I could look at this one day and come up with a totally different way to write it.
Yeah.
It's not right or wrong, it's just how can we make this better for the audience? And what I think also what it comes down to is, as you all know, working in a public sector, translation, making it so that if we have to have something translated pretty quickly, we would have it ready to go from the get-go, as opposed to trying to distill it into something that can be translated quickly.
Yeah. And I think a lot of agencies try to make sure that the English language and the translated versions are all the same. So the better your English language document, if you're gonna spend money to do that translation, you wanna do it once and have it,
I had very similar concerns, but I will say that your townwide training has gone a long way, because my directive needed to come from my leadership, who was very long-winded, and I'm over here with a crown still. But we got him on board, and I've been able to use it, especially with our frontline employees and our internal emails. Doing bullet proofs, making it much shorter, much more readable, using headings. I'm getting a lot more response from our weekly internal emails, so that was good. I will say lesson learned though, after one of the very first, trainings in this, I went through and I scrubbed our website, because there were just some really weird things on there. Like, our operating hours were like 5:56 AM to 11:57 PM, and I was like, well, that's not how people talk, let me round those up. Except that apparently that was very regulated federal language tied to our grants. So I had to go back and change all that. So just knowing why things were the way they were before scrubbing something that hard would have gone a long way too.
That's awesome, I didn't know either of those stories.
That also, like, when we first started this plain language stuff years ago, what we tried to, impress upon people was like, you wanna start with plain language, as opposed to, you have a document, and then you go through it with somebody, and then they're like, here, let me plain language that for you again, using the verb form. The idea is that you start with plain language, and the people who made our website did not start with plain language. But that's the intention, to start there. As Mary Jane said, it does take longer, it takes more effort to actually think through it, and I would say 90% of the time, we don't have time to start with plain language, but that was the intended goal, I think, with the federal government version, is like, you start here, and then you move through the process, and then you come out with whatever your audience needs. But generally, we're putting fingers to keyboard, and then going through the process.
And I don't think you mentioned anything like this, so I wanna throw it in, that, not just like my federal grant stuff, but, there's other topics that don't deserve plain language, like our ADA accessibility, anything like legal, like I gotta pump the brakes and yell down the hallway for somebody to come write long form and protect us properly when that stuff happens.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, because with the attorney's office, for example, this summer, I wanted to rewrite our small services contract, so I actually used AI and to give me a plain language version of this document. Then I cleaned it up and sent it to them. I was like, this is great, and they're like, and we're gonna put this stuff back in, because we have to. And so that back and forth is important. I think you have to ask those questions and find out why people do things, and some give and take. So I think we're taking an a la carte approach. You know, this one gets the full service, this one, you know, we're just gonna touch up, this one is kinda in the middle. And wherever people are, we try to meet them there and make progress. Yes?
We have a couple of individuals who really, you know, they have written something, and their comment is, well, it has to be, not even attorneys, but it has to be written or spoken like this, or else it doesn't make sense, which is maybe true, maybe not. But our approach to trying to make it more readable and digestible is maybe just leave, like, even if you were to leave all the words in here, but simply just to break it out and put it into chunks and organize it better, like, that's the thing I'm taking from this, is like, cool, we'll keep all of your words, but we're gonna make it make sense.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a little bit of
Yeah.
when we can inch.
Yeah, and then next
Yeah.
time when it comes back and
Yeah.
you're like, hey, what if we just touched
Baby
on this
steps.
part?
Yeah.
One thing I will say too, is sometimes we have documents that, you know, we have to use because of the federal government, but we still need to be able to explain them to people. So we have written a plain language guide to our public housing reform. And it's not a legally binding document, but it says, this section is asking you X, this section means Y. So it's an explainer, if you will. So that's another approach. You wanna say anything, Alex?
I was just gonna add that I have found this really helpful, and, you know, we've all thought this way before, like, we take our colleagues' work and help them make it better, but I always have Christina look at what I wrote, because she'll find something I didn't catch, and so, as much as we think we're really good at this, I just keep finding things, and it's always helpful to have a second set of eyes.
An artist's work is never done.
That's what I say. We like to say progress, not perfection.
Here's, if you were curious.
Yeah, this was
is
sort
that
of
fire
our,
department email.
yeah. And I think we hit on a lot of this.
Yep.
Yes.
Hi, my apologies for coming late, it was traffic and I fought in an accident out there. I'm a Nirdlinger, work with Orange County and work with translations and contract translators, and this is a very important part. And thank you so much. Plain language, it really helps for translations. First of all, because we are trying to approach the people who learn English as a second language, and then plain language is so helpful. So I see sometimes as a translator, we cannot change any structure, whatever come in English, that's the way it has to be translated. But this help, to give the exactly same message, but more clear and more easy to digest for a second, second language people. So yeah, appreciate this. Thank you.
Well, and the other thing we try to stress is, like I said at the beginning, I think it may have been right before you came, it's not just the words, it's the pictures. So organizing it this way, we haven't even touched on the visuals, but I think I saw health benefits, that annual, which of your benefits do you want to keep or change, open enrollment. And the guide to it had icons next to everything, so, it's like there's an engagement ring, did you get married or divorced? Little kids, did you have kids? So things like that can also help because the visuals don't need to be translated and it's that extra layer of meaning. Okay, so let's talk about user testing. I think that's my slide. What's next? Oh,
It's not.
okay. When I first came to the town, we had a travel form in triplicate, carbon copy, that I filled out because I needed to go to a conference, and it came back to me with this pre-printed Post-it note on it, and there were big red checks and all the things that I had done wrong. And I was like, this is crazy, because if you have this form that is so bad, everybody is making these mistakes on a regular basis, why did you spend the time to go print Post-it notes so you could tell them the mistakes they're making instead of just fixing the form? And the answer was probably that we pre-purchased 6,000 of these. So I went down and got a pad of those notes because I was like, this is crazy. I didn't know what to do with that until years later. But that's a pain point, right? So it just kind of loops back to what we were saying at the beginning. If someone's asking the same question, making the same mistake, if you're seeing it over and over, don't think that they're broken, like there's something at the source that needs to be fixed. Just remember the Post-it note. I want to talk a little bit about user groups because this may be helpful for all of you. The person who thinks that they're perfect at plain language, or they think that their content is great and this is exactly what people need to understand, maybe test that. That's great. What if we gave it to a few people and just verified that this is working for them? So I've talked a little bit about peer review. Step outside your expertise, get someone in a different department. You can brainstorm or workshop stuff with them ahead of time. You can also review or audit a document. So, can you understand this? Do you know what to do with this? End user usability testing is great. We have done less of this. I would like to do more in the next year. It can be very formal or informal, but that's where you get a group of people who are like the people who are going to use your document. One example I do have from our experience is we were revamping our permit pages and we had a bunch of contractors come in and sit down at some computers and pretend they were working their way through the system on the beta site. And we're like, why are you clicking there? And they're like, oh, because I thought this. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna need to change that title. So watching somebody actually interact with your content and asking them, why are you doing that? What do you think? What questions do you have? Can really inform your understanding of how something's coming across. Because again, it's hard for us to know what it's like to be that end user. And we do try to compensate people if they give us community feedback. I think this is another opportunity to do that. It could be pizza. And let's see. So the end user group, I just want to give you a couple examples of what that can look like. You ask them these kinds of questions, or you just watch them. So you can set this up. We want to set some tables up at the library, catch people as they come in and say, did you understand this document? How would you fill this out? Or give them the A/B test. Which of these do you prefer? Which one is clearer? So there are different ways to work with an end user group. I think next is a checklist. Yeah. So we've done some of this in-house. You have a copy of the checklist that we use. And I was gonna give you a chance to be our users, because we have a document. If you wanna pair up in like groups of 2 or 3, pass some of this around. This is something we would like to provide, so I'm taking advantage of your presence to help us. You have a copy of the checklist, you could use that to get started. But I would love your feedback on how we could make this document better for our folks. So if you don't mind taking about 10 minutes to look through that in some small groups, then we'll hear back from you. Thank you in advance. Christina mentioned it earlier. She asked if I could sort of tell you some lessons learned from starting this program. We really did start grassroots, just a few of us trying this out, probably about 5 years ago. And about a little over a year ago, we decided to try to make a town-wide push. And that was, it was a big effort. We got some consulting help just to organize our material, take all the stuff that we had homegrown and make it look like one body of work, to help us script out the training videos and record those. So we did invest some money in that. And that content that you see on the style guide is really what we built over the years, but now it kind of looks nice. And I would say the biggest things were we had 2 town managers in that time, both of whom were very supportive of the effort. We had a core group of people who were willing to do the legwork and do the training and all that. And so, I mean, we've put in a lot of hours on that. But I think the payoff has been, like Emily said, getting all of our department leadership to understand what we're doing and why, and then train the departments and push it out to as many staff as possible. And then,
So you mentioned the videos, it did help that we did have these like really short training videos. They were more like explainer videos than anything prior to people coming into the training. So basically you can come sit down for 45 minutes to an hour and we tie it all together and get some practical use. But first having those videos was definitely key.
that was a big switch, because before we would try to explain all of the concepts and then practice them. And so now people watch the videos on their own time. There's 7 short segments and there's a little quiz at the end. So they come already knowing sort of the basics of plain language. And then we do some activities and kind of like what you all did here today. You got the advanced levels since you're any questions? Yes.
Hi, I have a question. Since my department deals with Parks and Recreation, what experience do you have working with your Department of Parks and Recreation, Chapel Hill, as it relates to like program guides? We have a program guide that we put together, and it's about like 10 pages long, and it has various programming activities in there, and we have descriptions of each program and activity as well. So like, what advice or what have you done to help Parks and Recreation, Chapel Hill with their guides, if any?
We haven't done the program guide here. We have looked at more discrete pieces of work of theirs, like that rules document was one.
In the application.
Yeah, and
Fee reduction.
yeah, fee reduction. What I would say for a big document like that is get a few people together who wanna work on it. Give yourselves sort of a timeline, set up some workshop times, go through it. This is just one way to approach it. But the first thing you might do is get some of your users to come in and sit down with the guide you have today and just talk to you about it. Or go sit in front of one of your facilities with a table and just, a sign that says, can you answer a couple questions for us? Just ask people, what do you think about this? Does it look good? You could have a couple of questions for them. If you don't wanna do that, that's good to do at the beginning. You can also do something like that in the middle, where, say you've mocked up a couple of examples of how you might change it before you print it and all. Go sit at a table in front of one of your facilities, and as people walk by, say, can you tell us which of these you prefer? Maybe just the front page. And just why. And sometimes people are people pleasers, and they'll be like, oh, they both look great. You'd be like, great, can you tell me like what you like about this one or what you like about this one? So you might have to probe a little bit, so.
I
those
was
are some thoughts.
surprised before, so I know.
There you go.
Why do you like this gown versus this gown?
Yeah, that's how you do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions?
I have a last question.
Okay.
What has been, I guess, one of the challenges of this, creating this guide or getting started, I would say? Like, what was one of your challenges?
Just keeping it going, because it is a lot of work and we also have full-time jobs. So the, you know, for me, it's been have a long list of everything you're gonna do and just keep at it and have really good people who are also enthusiastic about it, who, you can't just do this as one person. You can't even do it as 5 people. So it does take that organizational buy-in and just support. And I think that's one of the things, like, we're really happy to be at this point, but we're gonna start thinking about, like, how do we maintain it? Cause there's excitement over something new and training, but how do you keep it going? Collecting data is also hard.